Welcome to the Giving Business Soul podcast, where we speak with successful entrepreneurs who have learned to integrate soul and business, redefining leadership and ultimately utilizing business as a force for good. Well, man, I think with that, maybe we can just kind of drop right into this conversation, brother. And so in some regard, Tocayo, right? Nice. Yeah, Juan Francisco. And so I'm sitting here with somebody I esteem very much. You know, he's been on the path of the merchant and just kind of came into GBS and said, hey, I'm all in, and decided to go and just kind of jump right into the path of the merchant, which also includes going through the round table. And we were just talking about how synchronistically it all kind of came together. But, you know, I think what I'd love to start with, Juan, it would be to maybe give people a little bit of background, a bit about, you know, your upbringing. I think it's obviously a fascinating one, and specifically this kind of where you were right before the intersection between, you know, where you were headed maybe or going, and then where GBS sort of intersects your own journey, and then we can talk about what's happened since, you know, because that's a very rich story as well. So jump us in.
Thank you, Francisco. I also want to start off with saying that I'm thankful for your hard work. And if you weren't like bold and dedicated to the work you've done, I don't think a lot of people would come across what you've learn and help us put the puzzle together.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, so I've been thinking about the past couple of months in the process, and I've kind of tried to put things together as to what's been happening, because it's been like day by day, but at the same time it's been
it's quite a story.
So are we gonna be able to cut some things out?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, don't even worry about it. Yeah.
Remember, these cameras do not exist. Only Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The amount of pressure just kicked in. I was like, wow, what happened?
Don't worry about it.
Oh yeah. Everything's cut. That's why, like, even I just try to get rolling on stuff, and we just start. Yeah, the magic of editing.
Oh my God, like, what's happening?
Yeah. We're gonna knock out some breath work right now. Well, and then too, I think, I think energetically, the room was already very deep. You know, okay. Like, because Hilda has been in this space for like 2-3 years. And I don't know if you felt it, but I mean, like, she was able to describe,
Off the rip.
Just, and then we were just kind of, and like, I just dropped a sit. And then at the end, we were kind of getting into Book of Revelations. so the room was already like, okay. So then I feel like immediately you kind of stepped in. You're like, whoa, man, I got to get my grounding here. Yeah. I'm in this deep water. But as a merchant, you know, like you're just going to be like these anchors just. So.
But so going back to what I was going to start off saying was that there's I call this the path of less resistance. And even the word path of less resistance may seem like it's an easy thing to do and easy to arrive. But if I can look at my life prior to GBS, it wasn't the path of less resistance. But automatically, I believe we think we're choosing the best decisions, we're making the best approach to life. And so growing up, and I was born in Mexico, and I came to the States without a father. My mom, my grandmother, my tias were around me to help me be protected and become independent. You know, you've had a lot of questions, and I think the father figure plays a big part.
Sure.
In my life, in everybody's lives, really. But the question growing up was where was my father? Like, where was he? Why wasn't he in my life? And you kind of just get used to it and say, you know what, this is normal. And I remember being in kindergarten, and other friends of mine had fathers, and I would question, why don't I have one? Why don't I have a father myself? and you kind of just learn to kind of live with it and ignore it and kind of just think this is normal and
Yeah.
it's going to be okay. And my mom did a great job by giving me a lot of love, a lot of passion, a lot of strength and guidance into staying in a right track of school and hard work and dedication. And my grandmother was a big pillar in my life also, where she was like the strong one, very strong one, and she always kept me also in the right track. So that, kind of allowed me to ignore more the part that I don't have a father and I don't need a father.
So strong women
Yeah.
kind of guiding the early part of your journey, the mother, the grandmother, and they kind of put the rails on, kept you on the straight and narrow a bit. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and so thankful for that, because it's as you grow older and you understand the challenges of life, of being protected and having food and a roof over your head. It's a lot of work what they did. So in as I was growing up into my teenage years, that's the as you're trying to understand your personality and the fears and the insecurities, it's when it comes maybe a little bit stronger, and that father figure comes again. And so I remember, having a conversation with my mom and asking, where is he? What happened? And I had seen him 3-4 times as I was growing up, and just being told, hey, this is your dad. So, okay, cool. And then not see him again for years and move on. But as I grew older, my mom told me the story of how things happened, because they separated when I was 8 months.
Okay.
And there was a very sad story to how that happened. There was abuse. And at that time, I kind of got resented towards that. I was very mad at what I was told. Had nothing to do with me, but I think you automatically take on that and say, hey, this is wrong.
Sure.
But that was just what I was told, right? Like it has nothing to do with me, my mom, my dad, my grandmother, nothing to do with that. But it's hard to understand that as you're being told.
Right.
And long story short, with that is I started to question why wasn't he in my life, and why wasn't he being part of like my personal life, my growth, high school, a little bit of college. But even though as I mentioned this now, it wasn't as typical. Like I wasn't asking these questions constantly.
Yeah.
I was just with trying to have a great life and trying to be purposeful and moving forward to great things, and trying to develop the skills that I needed in order to be happy with my career and the things that I was doing. So it was a lot of happiness, really. It was a lot of gratefulness, very thankful, and happy for the little things. Nature, sunsets, little things like this that just make you feel thankful.
Yeah. So then sounds like then obviously, father figure's not in the picture, but you got a really nice sort of scenario of women that love you, care for you, supporting you, and allows you to kind of experience a rather nice upbringing, but certainly question a bit in the background that resurfaces from time to time. And but as I know, obviously from working with you, it's like you go into college, you have like this drive and this determination, and you get out of school and you go into architecture, and but there's also a drive, that I think, as sometimes some of the pain that we inherit can be a great source of drive, in a lot of ways, to hopefully gain that love or admiration or respect. And we don't know it, so maybe talk a little bit about how that actually got you to arrive to, having a business, I guess.
I have a story with my mom when we came to the States. We're doing the corrida of the farm workers, and we're in Lancaster, and we're in the middle of the onion fields, and that was our summers. Go to the campo and do all the work, and I was questioning my mom, like, why are we here? Like, why are we like sleeping here in the car? We're sleeping in the car, and we're like picking up onions, and we were 8 years old, and so we're innocent in a way, you know. And so the I asked my mom, I was like, why are we here? Even though it was very interesting to me. It was freedom in a way, but she says, do hard work and um, do be disciplined and follow your passions. And I was 7 years old, and it stuck to me.
Wow.
It stuck to me. It just stuck to me, and I said, okay, that's what I have to do in a very innocent way.
Yeah.
So as I move forward in life, and I'm going through high school and going through college, I'm for some reason very driven that this illusion of happiness will be in the career that I eventually work on. And so it was good enough to get me going and to go through the obstacles and the challenges in life to arrive in a good place of maybe not so much of the survival.
Right.
And there's this, I believe that there's this idealistic way of thinking, and I fall into that a lot of the times. And then there's reality, and you have to merge both of them. And so you're constantly being driven by these aspirations and motivations, and then you have reality. And a lot of those times, those realities are your shadows, and these shadows show up constantly in your life. So as I had moved through those stages of survival into having a good business and allowing that business to be fulfilled through this idealistic idea of, in this case for me, architecture is amazing, and we can create something out of nothing, and we love the design process and the creative process, and building some in a way systems and building a business around that. Gave me a lot of fulfillment, but I can say that the one thing that it gave me was escape a little bit of the survival state. And so
Makes sense, yeah.
when you escape that a bit and you start to open up your mind to other ideas and philosophies and understandings of life, you start to question more things.
Sure.
So now I started questioning my own career. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why is there tension in certain days out of the week? And why is there tension here and there? And why do I do not feel maybe capable of doing more, or doubt myself, and just a little bit of agony here and there? So you in a way escape the survival, but you find out that that's not it, that there's more to it. And I had met Jose at the time, and I had met him maybe like 4 years back, 2 years back, about 4 years back. And I met him, we started a friendship, and then he went his own way, I went my own way, and we still follow each other on social media, and I see that he's onto something. And it would just go like in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, I gotta talk to Jose one of these days. And then I just go on my life, continue to grow the business, continue to do the things that I love, always focusing on the good, which allows for those shadows maybe to kind of be like put away. But something kept coming up, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just call Jose. And I called him on a very stressful day for me. I was very stressed out. I was like, man, I worked for this. Is this what it's all about? Like, I thought it was gonna be fun. I thought it was gonna be amazing. And I'm also dealing with alcohol. Alcohol is like an issue in my life, and now at this time I'm married to my wife, and that's becoming an issue. And this chasing that you just don't know when it's gonna happen or when it's gonna end. And you've been told and conditioned that this is the way. At least for me, that's how I was conditioned. And I believe that the soul would speak to you. At least that was happening to me. There was something that was saying, hey, there's got to be more. And yes, there's suffering, but there's got to be an ease to that suffering and those shadows. And I reach out to Jose. I tell him, hey, brother, I'm going through this right now. I'm very happy with my business, but I know you're onto something. Can you tell me, what are you doing? What is it that you're practicing? What are you into? And yeah, he tells me, we're in Giving Business Soul. This is what we do. We have the round table. You're more than welcome to join us. And I join, take some of the classes. I think I just fall off a little bit, get back into the day to day, going to sleep at 2 a.m. Just again, another type of survival, I would say. And I think you reached out on Instagram. You said, "Hey, brother, I know you haven't talked in a while, but I'm happy to join in with you on a Zoom meeting." And then we joined on a Zoom meeting. And then after that conversation, I was like, what was that? Like, I felt I was left with a lot of peace. And it wasn't like we didn't diving into anything. We just had a conversation. So after that, I talked to my wife, Anna, and I said, "Hey, I talked to Francisco. I think they have something that I don't know about that maybe I need to find out, putting the pieces together. And I think they kind of have a puzzle going on where they can help put those pieces together." And so I reach out to Jose again, and I say, "Hey, Jose, do you have something more than the round table?" Because I had tried the round table, and I went through halfway through it.
Right.
And I said, "I want something like I can go deeper, more committed, something that's just deeper and stronger and everything, right?" So he said, "Yeah, we have the Path of the Merchant." And so I said, let's do that. And then you guys spoke, and then we jumped in a meeting, and
Got it.
And it happened. So we did the round table along with the Path of the Merchant at the same time. And this is where I think that I call the path of less resistance.
Okay.
So
Circling back to the path of less resistance.
Path of less resistance, because it sounds easy.
Yeah, sure.
It sounds like the path of less resistance would be the easiest to do, but it's the most tension time to transition into the path of less resistance. And after this work, and as we're going through the work,
right,
I was able to understand the heart and the ego, and the light and the shadow, and how living in the shadow and living in the ego continues and expands the suffering. So I think for some reason, automatically, we fall into this default survival, which is, if you did it to me, I'm gonna do it to you, or I'm gonna close my heart and I'm gonna be hardened, and I'm gonna be this type of person to be protecting of my own self. And if we look around the world, that's typically what's happening, from personal relationships to wars. There's this whole spectrum of the survival of the ego that's constantly there to show up and protect yourself. The unfortunate thing about that is that it keeps hurting you, and it keeps bringing the heart more shallow and smaller, and closing the heart.
right,
So even though when somebody as the ego comes into play, which is our natural path of less resistance currently, which was in my life, this natural path of less resistance, oh, well, this is what they did, I'm going to do this. Or if this is what they say, this constant think of the ego protecting itself.
Yeah.
And when I understood that, from my father, that I can have a relationship with him, and that I can truly love him, and that was a big ego stepping aside and saying, "Hey," or me saying, "Hey, ego, get out of the way. I want to love my father.
Right.
He gave me the life I have today, and if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today.
Sure.
I wouldn't have life. I wouldn't have these emotions, even if they're bad emotions or good emotions, they wouldn't be here." So that was one of the biggest things or breakthroughs that I was able to learn from the Path of the Merchant and the Round Table. These two elements at play, the heart and the ego.
Yeah.
And how the ego seems to be the most reasonable, because it makes all the sense. It's the rational part of your human being that says, be aware.
Yeah, rational in this, from the sense of your experience that you've had, that it sort of, again, is a mechanism of protection and keeping you safe and comfortable, and it's an easy sort of default state, as you're saying, which is the path of least resistance. Just keep listening to that, kind of keep staying in the very easy, comfortable space, but no growth, no evolution, until you start to listen to, or at least have the heart begin to open, so that you can start to kind of listen to that. And I know for you, like, as this process has taken place, Because one of the big things that we really want to demonstrate here with GBS is that as an entrepreneur, once you do take the path of least resistance per se and like venture into yourself, and start to do this work, that as you start to regain these lost parts of yourself, these lost tokens, you start to be more conscious, you become more present, you become more aware, that it ripples into your business. It's almost like as you become more whole, so does your business. And I think if you can kind of color that in for people, I think that would be really helpful for people listening, because sometimes as an entrepreneur, like in your case, I mean, you were doing it very similar to what I did. I think a lot of people that we come up as entrepreneurs in the Western world and the condition of society, hey, just work your ass off, and you're gonna get some money, and you're gonna make some money, and you're gonna get the house, and everything's gonna be okay, and you're gonna be happy. And it's like then you start to hit on those boxes, check, 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 and all of a sudden you're there, but there's this void still in the heart. All of a sudden you're not evolving at a soul level. You're making progress on the goal line of life, but on the soul line you're like stuck. Then the alcohol comes in, bad decisions, because it's like the soul wants to evolve and expand and grow, and when it feels like it's not, all these tendencies start to kind of happen. And but if you could maybe share like what how has it rippled into the business, because you have a really successful architectural design firm, you're so young still, and what can somebody expect as an entrepreneur and business owner, like if you do this work, what happens?
Yeah, I would like to start with saying that building a business leads you into soul development.
Yeah, that's
because you
great.
do personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why you do personal development is because you understand that you need to develop yourself in order for the business to grow.
Like your leadership needs to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's one.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever you are as a person will be reflected in your business. So if you want your business to grow, you're like, well, I got to do something about this, and it's coming to me.
Yeah.
And that's what led me into questioning things. Well, if I want this business to grow, what do I need to do? Because it looks like I'm in the way. And that led me to personal development, which then I understood that it was more of a soul development.
Yeah, that's great.
And in our conversations, you said something very important that made a big shift. And I think this is like the takeaway of this program that you've built, which is, how do you show up to work? What conditions and what state of mind and frequency do you show up to work? So in order to show up to work in the right terms, you have to do all the cleanup.
Right.
And that's probably the hardest and the path of more resistance is to do the cleanup. So you have a wake up to say, hey, I acknowledge that I need to do a change, a shift, take another turn. It's not working out as I thought. There has to be a better way. You do personal development. You turn into soul development, because that's the real essence of who you truly are.
That's right.
Find your true nature. And what happens is you stop following maybe other people that you thought that were successful, and you understand your own path, being true to yourself.
That's huge.
And as you do that, you continue to then reflect a genuine message across your team. And I remember when I first came across this, I was wondering, how can I also get my team to understand this new way of thinking? But it happened, not that we want to push that message either.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own way of thinking, and that's totally perfect. But the ambient or the way of working together and collaborating and with clients as well was by how I was showing up to work.
Right.
I was available. I was energized. I was focused. I've been working on the cleanup. So more secure, more present, more aware, more empathetic.
Wow.
And that's been leading the business into a more ease and relaxed, productive way of doing things.
Wow. Yeah, that's great, because it's because I think the visual that I got right there, it's that your frequency is the one that's sort of informing everything, and so as you're coming out of that sort of lower conscious state of survival only, then you start to provide like this energetic field in your organization, in your garden.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're the gardener, and then this is your garden, and the frequency that's in there, it's calm, it's emotionally intelligent, it's, more of a witness. It's not like in there and with this frequency of like, I gotta forcing and pushing and. It's like it's stressful. It's business, and don't you know how much responsibility is on me? And all this old stuff, and it's like you rise into something much different, and it starts certainly. And that's the great thing, as you know, it's like as a leader, I mean, just by transforming our consciousness and walking in the world in a way that's much more empowered, it literally starts to influence everything around you, right? And I think in your case, obviously, it's happened for your organization. And one of the things that we obviously focus on the path of the merchant is really, like as Juan is mentioning, this idea of really integrating the shadow and working on sort of what we describe as the meta goal in consciousness, which is sort of that internal marriage of masculine and feminine, of the light and the dark. We as a human, we're the entire spectrum of light and dark. We have an animal nature and we have a divine nature. And if we, sort of unacknowledge one side of it, then it's like we're half of who we are. And so much of this game is acknowledging that we're all of it. And I think as we do that inside of ourselves, then the organizations also start to reflect that wholeness. And what I sort of envision is that people start to take on the philanthropy. They start to take on sort of the soul component of the business, this generous, serving, loving, compassionate. It's like the drive is there, but it's like you then reclaim, this love for humanity. So talk about that, because you obviously got an organization. You're doing the depth of the work of the path of the merchant. You're reclaiming all these lost tokens, and all of a sudden your organization is much more in flow and in harmony. But simultaneously, this philanthropic component sort of started to integrate. And what's that been like?
This goes back to the idealistic way of thinking. I think that if we allow that to even be a thought for a lot of us, and to think this world could be a better place, and we could impact in many ways that we have tools for, I think we would do much better.
Yeah.
And sometimes, because again, we're in the survival state, the ego is running the show. We're just thinking about ourselves. We're just doing the things that will benefit us. And once you allow the heart to open, and you allow the healing, and you retake your tokens, and a great example of that was my relationship with my father.
Yeah.
We take that relationship back and be open. Be open. And once you're open, you start to see where else can you impact in a positive way. So I'm from Mexicali, like I mentioned, from Mexico, and we've gone across the border. We've done some help at some immigrants' homes. We've taken food. I've had some of my team join us, but we're growing the idea into a more impactful way of applying what we do. So we do architecture, and we want to help people that are less fortunate with homes. You've inspired that for us as you've done this in Ensenada. We have the tools of what an architect does.
Yeah, sure.
So our goal is we're reaching out to local architects in the area of Mexicali that have done sustainable work, and we want to integrate our times of the week to develop a way of building a home that can be sustainable to the conditions of the weather in Mexicali, and then start that development plan as how we're going to finance it, how we're going to integrate it, and then how we're going to make it sustainable in economically and in every way.
Wow.
We're in conversations about how can we have conversations with certain schools at an early age about what architecture is. Maybe even intentionally going to casas hogares.
Okay.
Where there's kids without maybe a good,
like orphanages.
Yeah. Orphanages, and speak to them and have an inspiration and drop a seed of this is what architecture is. And I feel architecture is a very creative and very natural career. So, it could inspire some kids into
Nice.
holding on to something, just like my mom said when we were in the field.
Right.
Hold on to this.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that just helped me thrive and work hard through the way of to what I've done today.
Wow.
So we want to definitely put the time, the skills, the finances into making that
Wow.
something that can be.
And you've done this twice now since we've been working together. So you took a couple people from the office. What is it like to like get people from the team to like participate and see you in that light, right? Because they've seen the business side. Now they get to see like this soul-centered leader that's like on the front lines. It's not, he's not the guy on the ivory tower shelling out orders. He's actually boots on the ground doing, religious work, really, go be with the sick and the poor, as the great man said, But what's that like about sort of bringing that component into the culture?
I would have to say that I haven't asked really, but for me, you realize you think you're doing something amazing, and then you show up, and you realize how much more work is needed.
Yeah.
So it's a reality check.
Sure.
It's a big motivator to even continue to do more great work, to be able to have a bigger vision and a bigger mission than just us.
And what's great about that, right, is like that ambition now, you can feel really good about the ambition because you know that as like the greater that becomes, the greater you'll be able to contribute, right? Yes. So it's like there's a tie-in where it's like, some people don't care, right? It's like, I just want to be ambitious and get to $1 billion and, whatever. But I think there are some people that have a little bit of a reservation, I think, if it's not rooted in something that's significant. I think that's one of the beauties of this thing is that, like, let's make a lot of money so that we can help a lot of people. Because once you start opening up the sort of, I would say, like, it's somewhat like the way I would describe it, and this is just me, is that, when you really dedicate yourself to this sort of path of the merchant and you really do the work of opening up your heart, like it says in one of the planetary initiations of the holy matrimony, it's like once your heart permanently opens, it's like your life gets used in the service of the whole, where your work becomes your worship, and you're because the heart's open, and that's where God really is able to move you. And when that intelligence is moving you and it moves you to assist some strata of the suffering of society, and you then open up that strata and see just how deep the suffering is. It's so deep, the collective suffering. It's like a well of suffering. We could give the rest of our lives to try to heal this suffering, and it's just so it feels everlasting in some regard. And so that portal, Annabelle describes it really well, but it's kind of like a well of grief, and that well of grief, when again trying to language is that when you open up, there's just so much of the collective suffering. So it's a well of grief that's there. But if you can, do the work of the mystic or this internal path, that suffering becomes fuel. It becomes a fuel source, right? Because that there's so much more to serve and assist and help and give that you can draw from that, because it's a forever fuel, really, like how much suffering is in our own life. But when you take the freaking aggregate of the last few thousand years of suffering in the collective DNA, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, I remember when we first spoke, it was this. I remember calling you and I said, we have it all wrong. The system is upside down. The way things work is upside down. Even the way we eat is upside down. And I think the little things in your personal life and the shadows and taking the tokens and opening up the heart, then you start to look outside and you're like, wait, the whole world is in this space. And we're so selfless or selfish. And we're just focused on ourselves. And I think back to what I said earlier, from your personal relationships to wars, you see the agony and the selfishness and the just thinking about ourselves. And in architecture, there's this way of always thinking about the future. and coexisting and living sustainably. And so that's constantly in my way of work. And you ask yourself, could it be different? Could all this suffering be different? But you go back to our natural way of falling into this default of survivalness and eye to eye, and you just see this in a massive, like a big scale, and then you're like you said, like how much is there out there you can actually fix?
Yeah.
And it just goes back to, well, I got to start here.
Exactly.
It's inside. It goes back to the inside, and if I can do the work inside and be some type of effect upon other people around you, then eventually through years and years of work, we can change our reality of what's happening now and actually live in a very sustainable world.
Right.
We're not burning our resources and treating animals that the way they were treated, and all these a lot of things that we kind of look away from.
Right.
And we just kind of, oh, everything is perfect. My grass is green here, and that's all I care about. But as you do the inner work, it's inevitable to look outside of the world and see what's actually happening and what are the roots of all these things. And it goes back to our survival.
Yeah.
And
and that's the game, right? It's like literally just trying to come out of that individually, and through that you'll assist the collective. And I think in our individual journey is very reflective of the collective one, right? Just in the same way that you've come out of that frequency, it's like our ability will be to do that for the whole, but it's got to be sufficient, of us to do that. And it, at least it's a direction.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
a great direction.
Yeah. I was just having this great conversation. It was one of these really interesting moments of decadence, where I get invited over to Laguna Beach. And if Jerry or Rebecca, you're listening, this one's for you. And thank you, Troy, and for the invitation, and Paul for being there, and Jose. But we got invited to this beautiful spot. And it was in Laguna Beach, and it was just right on the water, and it was just this very mysterious moment in time. We just like, yeah, sure, we'll go. And it's like all of a sudden we're there, and we're right on the water, and right having this incredible conversation. And this is a really big business person. Obviously, I mean, he's got a house right in Laguna Beach, and he's got a 35-year career, and he's done some incredible stuff. And when they were really sort of digesting what it was that Giving Business Soul is bringing forward with the archetype, the Violet organization, and all these different frameworks, it's like they sort of took the everything I shared in one of those like riffs, and they just kind of sat with it, and they said something to the degree, it's like, there's a movement here, and I said, yeah. And I said, it feels like, the rock inside of this David slingshot, this potentiality that we're holding. It's kind of like that rock in David's slingshot, David being the system, this thing that we're sort of battling against, and this opportunity that we have as entrepreneurs to do this work and to actually influence it. It's at least an orientation, it's a direction, versus being a bystander, doing nothing, or even worse, maybe contributing to the mayhem, by continuing to operate in the old paradigm, in the old context. It's like, there's a better way. And I think, as we all continue to demonstrate it, I think, you will bring more people along. And I think for you too, I mean, not only as your business really sort of taking on a new sort of energetic and aspirational, and all this different stuff happening there, but also in the family. Yeah. I know we've had some really interesting conversations about just how stuff has rippled into even your guys' marriage, into the family. What's that been like? Where people have, because it's like some people, when they begin this, it's like they want to transform, and then sometimes they just don't have the wherewithal or the will. But you really have gone through a pretty deep process, and it seems like people in your family are noticing it, and it's like, how does that feel?
It feels good, because I don't speak about it a lot, and that's the powerful thing. I think that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily speak about it a lot. We do have conversations where I question things and subtly, get a message in there. But what I've noticed is around my circle is there's more business opportunities. That's one of the things that started to happen recently.
Yeah, that's great.
And in the family, for now being married with my wife, is it's such a ease to have frameworks around how things when there's issues, how do you approach them.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times you constantly keep the frequency of peace, even if something's burning in front of you, you keep peace.
Yeah.
And again, I have to say this: the only way you can do that is if you do the inner work.
Right.
If you do the inner work, and then you present yourself with a lot of peace, and then people start to notice this guy's not freaking out. This guy's not crazy.
Yeah.
He's controlled.
Yeah.
And going back to family, when we started the work, I didn't mention to you because I was embarrassed that I had problems with alcohol. And we never mentioned it to even how to fix it or how to address it.
Yeah.
And just doing the work of cleanup,
Yeah.
alcohol just disappeared.
Wow.
And I remember I talked to you once,
Afterwards.
it disappeared.
Yeah, afterwards, yeah.
And so it was something that I truly was struggling with.
Yeah.
And it was a problem now in my marriage because I brought that into my marriage, and now it was affecting my wife. And I didn't know how to fix it. I tried different things. I was like, okay, now this time I'm going to be very disciplined. And you're disciplined for a couple of weeks, months, and you fall into it again.
Right.
And we wanted to look for a very, secure fix.
Yeah.
But again, that was just a result of the shadows.
Yeah.
And as we did the work, that brought the peace, and
That's
there was no
amazing.
need to alcohol.
No need to go to AA. I mean, not that that's a bad thing. Yeah, because it's such a challenge. That one. And it gets you, and it's so okay in society, and there's all sorts of jokes. It's like it's like the moment you say you don't drink, it's like, are you okay? What's the matter?
Exactly,
It's like it's such a norm. And so like to break out of it, it's a challenge, and to know that simply. It's kind of like what you're languaging. It's one of those frameworks of the wake up, the clean up, the grow up, the show up, right? But it's like when you clean up, you literally just grow out of things. You grow out of tendencies and patterns that are not healthy very naturally.
Yeah,
it's like an organic, I don't want to do that anymore. It doesn't have to be this really, challenging, hard thing. It's just like a natural thing that happens as you evolve in consciousness. Just certain things that are just not serving you just fall off, and relationships.
So again, I'm gonna say this again: path of less resistance. So doing the work, doing the cleanup, that's a lot of the hard work. And once you start to do that, things fall into place. There's no need for alcohol. There's no need to stay up late for the party. You can go home, rest, and you find the peace and the happiness within that time of your day. But I think my wife and I are excited to continue to do the work because we can see how I can, without forcing, impact our families and bring healness and allowing the true heart to be present and not the ego to be running the show. So I think if we are able to hold that energy and hold that peace and love with our families, then that ripple effect will continue on and on. And like I mentioned at the beginning, Francisco, the work you've done, I think is difficult. But I think it's also very natural to you now.
Sure.
Because you enjoy it. You have fun with it. It's great. You see the impact that you're taking on other people's lives and helping them put the puzzle together. Is that how you feel now? Is there obviously there's challenges. But you've done this for years. A lot of work, a lot of discipline, and how's that for you? How's that so far?
Well, I mean, the more that I do it, I think it's just, it gives me more insight into the soul, right? Into the patterns and psychology of people. So I think the more that I do it, it's more confirmation. Like these individuals that I was talking about. I mean, you have, it's a very successful organization of 35 years and hundreds of millions, not billions of dollars of revenue. and for them to sit with what I'm holding and what GBS is, and for them to say, hey, like this is something, it gives, it's kind of like my breadcrumbs that I talk about, right? Where it's like, this work is not easy, and it is a lot of like challenge and carving out, and certainly there is moments that you feel defeated. There's certain moments where it's like, I know that the breadcrumb is coming, but my humanness can get the best of me, where like I'm so devoted, but there's times where it's just like you're just sort of getting kicked, and it's just like, okay, I know it's gonna pass. But it's certainly nice to get those sort of breadcrumb moments where it's like, okay, and where it's at right now is just really in the completion of the book. It's kind of like been my greatest challenge to write the book. As you know, the Clarion Call has got a very specific timbre to it, and tone and energy behind it. And the book is in that same tone. And so it's like, I feel that once that gets completed and it starts to make its way into the collective consciousness, then people will start to come, through and begin to adopt the philosophy. It's really, at the end of the day, I think in the beginning you were saying like, this way of thinking, it's kind of a philosophy, an approach to business, an approach to life that you can hold. And it's not the only truth or the truth. It's just a truth that's very useful and empowering. And I think it really respects the naturalness of our blueprint, and in the sense that, it's catering to the two aspects of our humanity, our body and our soul, and giving you mechanisms to work in those domains to the greatest degree to like really activate our zenith, our greatest potential. And again, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I the best that I can do is try to, just be a scribe of my process. I feel like it will be very useful for people, because as you're seeing from your own journey with this stuff, it's like your purpose and the fulfillment you're looking for is going to emerge through the inner planes. Like it's locked in us somewhere. And once you do enough work, it's like eventually you come to that cave, and all of a sudden slowly this thing's open. It's like, and it's like, whoa, okay, this is what I've come here to do, and once that's got you, then it's like, it's just a matter of, getting comfortable with it. And I'm comfortable with it. I think it is, I've given my life to it. It's not that, again, it's glorious and easy, but it's certainly one that that I think is worthy of writing about. So, so that's where that.
Where would you find the instances when people have a wake up and they know there's something more and they have to go after it? Because I feel like naturally a lot of us feel that in our daily lives, at work, whatever, 9 to 5, whatever you're doing, you feel that. But if people would follow that intuition, then we can maybe not rush the process, but it will be a lot smoother, quicker. But people seem to fall back into the default and be comfortable with the feelings that have been over and over, repetitive again and again. Where do you find the people that wake up have the hardest struggle to move on to?
I think the hardest struggle for most people is like they just don't realize that there is an entirely other dimension of our psyche, of our human experience. There is certainly like the myth of survival, the myth of the logo or the logos, like information, like what we learn in the physical world. Right. But then there's also this other sort of mythos, or this sort of myth of meaning, and really what we're after is really that, right? And in the Western world, that really got stripped out, that there is this education for the soul per se. And I'm writing about this in the book, but, certainly it's like that door there was an attempt to shut the door of that side of our humanness, of that myth, of that mythology, of that myth of meaning. And because the church decided to close that door, we just completely focused outwardly. And now I think, where people have a challenge is like when that door really like, it's like that door is opening and the soul is literally like in agony at this point. It's like, come this way, it's like, hey, this is the way, come in this way. Because it's like, it's gone so far in the other direction of just all material and physical, that this other side. But I think it's just scary for people. I think that when the soul begins to call, it might be irrational. It might not follow logic. It's asking, the unknown, go down this pathway, you're going to get lost. It's like, it's too much of a difference in paradigms. And I think if people were to know that inside of this paradigm, there is a structure, there is an organizational intelligence to it, and it's existed since the very beginning of our species, and there's been holders of the wisdom that can offer, guidance inside of that space. And I think when people can understand that this is natural, this is a part of our essence, And I think when we start to bring that world back into this world, I think that's when we really begin to make some huge strides, because it's like everything comes from that side. That spiritual side, the quantum side, the physics. I mean, however you want to language it.
The mystical.
Yeah, it's like everything comes from the mystical, from the unseen, and makes its way into the seen. And when we begin to remember that again, and I guess not only remember it, but actually appreciate it, this is where we can get onto the path of really creating the world that we want. So yeah. That's where I think it's just people need that courage, and it's like, even when you look at that map of consciousness, for those listening, if you've never seen that map, at 200, that's where you break out of what you would consider the matrix. It's when you break out of the world of duality, right? But courage requires corazón, right? It's a strength of heart. So to literally bust out of the matrix, out of right and wrong, out of duality, you need to call on the strength of heart. And that strength of heart is going to have to kind of lead you into the darker places, unresolved material. But as you continue to refine that, integrate it, it's like, you just sort of, again, kind of keep elevating and to know that you can actually put effort somewhere inside of your reality that can give you an infinite return. It's like that there's, I'm doing these webinars called Becoming Limitless. And the essence of the only place that we're really limitless is in consciousness. There is no limit to the evolution in our consciousness. It really is infinite. It's limitless. And, if you just continue to work inside of the domain of knowing thyself, to where all the great teachers, avatars all pointed to in that direction. It's like the great treasures found inside. And it's like, think about it. It's like, do you really think that 95% of our DNA would be considered junk? The majority of the DNA is considered to be junk. It's like, I doubt it. This is where, it's like the domain of the AI, it's like, I have this sort of visual that we're sort of racing against AI, and what is trying to get unlocked is really our divine intelligence versus artificial intelligence. But that divine intelligence which is equivalent to that artificial, if not even much, much greater, is locked into that junk DNA. Imagine that entire additional 95% potential being opened up. We are the greatest supercomputer that's existed, but in order to activate it, well, I think that's the game.
You mentioned that this requires a lot of hearts, and I think is the trust in the hearts. And since we are accustomed to being in the survival, we don't trust the heart, because typically you'll be hurt.
Sure.
If you trust the heart.
Yeah.
And I think in this process, you learn to start to trust the hearts.
Yeah.
And there's this one thing that happens as you do that. You feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
You feel weak. Oh, I'm opening up the hearts. I'm taking down my walls, and I'm being full heart open.
Yeah.
And there's this fear that comes in as fragile. Am I fragile now? Because now I'm transparent.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that you actually become more courageous, like you said. You become stronger, and then the heart will guide you, take you to the right steps, give you confirmation, and then that actually makes you a lot stronger than depending on your ego to run the show. So I think that transition of, like you mentioned, the unknown, the it's scary. It looks like it's what's gonna happen there. I'm safe here in this emotions that are so repetitive, and it's okay to feel this way. I don't want to be on the unknown of other emotions that are stronger, courageous, and fulfilling. So it takes a heart. Like you said, it takes the heart to take on this journey and be transparent and open the heart. In order to access.
And the reality is that's the game. That's why, as you know, being on the path of the merchant, we study Yeshua, but we study him outside of the religion. But I always love that metaphor, that symbology of him with the sacred open heart. But I think that's what it's sort of indicating, is that that's the pathway. That's the pathway, is to open up the heart, to activate the presence of the Holy Spirit inside of the human vehicle, to be guided by that Holy Spirit. You call it the Sophianic light, the light of wisdom, of Sophia, that guides us through that. And that's the game we're playing, is to activate the heart. And the way you do it is it's the shadow work. Through more and more shadow work, and just knowing again the missing pieces and the frameworks, like, oh, I'm in this stage right now. Because I think, again, one of the things to point out, it's like these things essentially have been walked, these pathways. So there was already a known sort of pathway to arrive to actually opening the human heart, to activating your own divinity. So it was well trodden, well known. But all of these mystery schools had to kind of go underneath, because the Church of Rome, essentially anything that was against that doctrine was persecuted, but all of them held that. And I'll tell you something. I think that's I don't know. Maybe I think it's interesting, but like what I know is that this sort of alchemical marriage, this union of opposites, this pathway to ultimately open the human heart. This is the greatest treasure. And this is really ultimately why our soul incarnated into the earth, is to experience the consciousness of the open human heart. And if I understood that there was a framework and a passageway to do this, I would guard that with my life, right? And despite the persecution of the church that said, no, only one man can do that, and that's reserved for that. Nobody else can have an open human heart. Nobody can activate that consciousness. Only that one individual. And if I knew that there was a pathway, and in fact, as you know, this is actually what he was teaching. So, but it's like if I held that secret, I could see why these great men and women would have died for it. Like without this knowledge, our humanity would be completely in the dark. We would literally have no access to these, this great truth that we are divine and human, right? And that the role that we're playing is to, essentially, bring our spiritual essence to the physical matter.
You've mentioned something very important in the beginning of this journey with myself, is that you said, I'm going to help you remember. And that was interesting, because then again, goes back to trusting your own DNA.
Right.
And it's more the unlearning, but it was, as you mentioned it, we're going to help you remember your own wisdom.
Yeah.
That's already within you. It's inside of you. It's no more searching on the outside. And one of the things that happened is I stopped reading books. I was reading all kinds of books about how to sell better, how to do this. And then I trusted my own wisdom. Wow. And it was by remembering.
Yeah.
And I think just the framework of remembering allows you to access. And I kind of confirm that you do have this wisdom within you. Yeah. But it's been disturbed, or it's been, locked away by the world and the material world.
That's right.
And so the remembering of our DNA and what are we here to do, and access that, was my biggest confidence boost I could ever get.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have to learn how to talk or how to read a book about any type of psychology.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just natural to myself, and this gave me a huge boost of confidence.
Yeah.
And I remember I called Jose one day and I said, "Hey, bro, I'm going into this meeting. I'm so nervous." He's like, "You already know what you're gonna say. Some way, somehow, if you trust yourself, you already have the answers." And again, it goes back to the unknown.
Yeah.
You want to know everything. You want to be prepared, and then you start to just trust this process and trust yourself and trust your DNA and trust your wisdom, and it comes out.
Yeah.
And it shows up.
Yeah.
And so that remembering, I think it's kind of locked away for a lot of us.
Yeah, that's a great one. And certainly, again, like going back to what these individuals were safeguarding, many people have probably heard this term, but it's this idea of the philosopher's stone, right? It says that every human has within them this sort of philosopher's stone, you know, and this philosopher's stone is the source of our wisdom, you know, and so it's like when you do sufficient of this internal work, you start to touch that stone. You start to speak from that space. And then this is where the poetry starts to come. You know, it's like there's just like a funnel of information that gets articulated as you speak without much effort, you know. But you've tapped into it. But all the traditions, I mean, just type in philosopher's stone into Google if you're listening to this. What they safeguarded was that we're all geniuses. We all have this great God essence within us, this divine spark, and when we get access to it through the internal pathway and start to, you know, activate it, it's like these are the great men and women of the entire spectrum of our humanity. These are the people, you know, that lit up, they've activated to the highest degree. They're living at zenuses, and there's just sort of reference points for the rest of us. It's like it's not reserved for them. It was actually meant for everybody. And this veil that we've been sort of born into is the forgetting, and what the remembering is just that. So I think in order to kind of close this out, what I'd love for, you know, because I'd love for you to close us out with this, is that I know a lot of times in our sessions, you know, when you come into them and there's this real deep sense of like, of joy, of like excitement, of this sense like, man, I feel like I'm living in this really amazing reality with these great tools and understandings, but I, you know, so and I'm chopping it up a bit here, but it's like, how can you describe that for people, you know, because I know there is a genuine excitement from you where it's just like, man, I feel like, wow, this is, you know, some people maybe arrive to this at some point in their life at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Some people never do. And what I mean is just having sort of a set of frameworks and tools that actually really assist this human journey in a way that's pretty extraordinary to feel the depths and the heights of these emotions in such a wholesome way where you just feel that real deep connection with God. So what has it been? What can you language inside of that excitement, you know, the living inside of this?
Yeah. I remember on some of the sessions, I say, "Hey, Francisco, we're not going to have a session. We're going to have a testimony." Because it's been such a great week, and this happened and that happened. And I can't believe it, how amazing and how smooth things are. And it kind of feels like what you've mentioned, the Matrix. When you put on these glasses on, and then life's passing by and it's happening. And instead of agony, you see opportunity, you see a shadow that's coming up and saying, "Hey, you got to fix this, you got to pay attention to this." And then you do it, you step up to it, and you fix it. And then just there's this ease. And there's this, you used to say, or you say, or Carl Jung says this specifically, that pain is pleasure. Or is it Richard?
Maybe. Suffering is grace.
Suffering is grace.
Yeah, that's seventh seal of Richard.
Yeah. So when you hear that, it's like, what do you mean? Like, how is that fun?
Yeah, exactly.
And once you again like kind of put these glasses on and kind of escape the Matrix, it's such a pleasurable experience to go through pain, because it's life coming at you and telling you got to pay attention to this. Instead of keeping the agony and keeping the pain and just deal with it, you're like, let me show up. And the confidence is showing up is understanding that, like you mentioned, you are as strong as the shadow in front of you.
That's right.
So if you know that, you're happy to join the whatever that is that you have to face.
Yeah.
And so if life is peace and it's happiness, and there's things in life that will always continue to happen as challenges, and you have this frameworks of tools to how to see it with the right perspective, and it's actually here to teach you, and it's not here to put you in pain, then you have to get this flavor of life of, let's do this. Like, I want to enjoy the great times, and the low times I also want to enjoy, and I could enjoy now, versus being in a victim mode and be, why is this happening to me? And the biggest breakthrough of that was my father, that I was able to see. I am grateful and thankful that I do have a father, even if he didn't show up for whatever reason, and I was able to understand his story as well. And all that agony and pain that I felt turned into thankfulness and gratefulness. And now I get to enjoy him. We see each other. Like, we're on the phone constantly. He's giving me great advice. And now I look forward to the coming years of having a great time with him. But that wasn't going to be happen. That couldn't be happening if I didn't understand these frameworks.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it feels to me, again, kind of like in, being able to approach life from that vantage point, it makes it enjoyable. Or at least, like, you're like, wow, I can really suck the marrow out of this life and come from this place of just constant, improvement, evolution, and fulfillment. And man, I think seeing your growth through all this, your evolution through it, so early on too. I think it's gonna just be great to continue to like witness how you continue to like show up. And I think you're a great testament as well, because like, unlike me per se, like I had to go through those sort of the crisis. I think like with you are one of them, Juan Lopez, another one, where potentially, GBS doesn't come into the play here, into Juan Flores's play. You give it 3-5 years, maybe there's a kid or two, but the alcohol gets worse, and you build a company and it gets to a decent size, and then because no roots were developed inside of yourself, the empire comes crumbling down. And instead you heard the call, you had the courage, you went in, and now you've cleaned up, developed roots, you're developing a kingdom versus an empire. Because you're working from the inside out, from the immortal to the external, And I think doing that, is just a great testament that you don't have to wait for crisis. That, if you are an entrepreneur and you want to build a kingdom, not an empire, a kingdom, that there is a way. And I think it's fantastic. So thank you for your work, demonstrating what a kingdom looks like. Congratulations on your beautiful wife and everything that's happening in your life, and honored to be walking you into these depths, brother.
Thank you, Francisco. I appreciate the time and your guidance.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you for joining us on the Giving Business Soul podcast. If you want to learn more about the transformative work we're doing, please visit our website at givingbusinesssoul.com. Discover how you can make a difference in the world through your business while fulfilling your spirit, enhancing your health, vitality, and relationships. And until next time, stay inspired, my friend.